time. Flapped off to the right, and Senna.
The year was 1994, and the legendary Ayrton Senna had finally chosen to leave his beloved McLaren team for the team of Williams. But one race would ultimately see the world of Formula One change forever and usher in a new age for the sport of Formula One. Join us today as we look at the incredible life of Ayrton Senna and look at that faithful day in Imola that would be the final farewell to perhaps the best naturally talented driver the world has ever seen. The best naturally talented F1 driver the world has ever seen. Born in Brazil on March 21, 1960, Senna never had an easy path to Formula One success like many of his modern-day peers. Senna truly had to battle to find sponsorships for himself to compete with some of the bigger names, but had the opportunity to work for his family whilst living in his home country. Unfortunately, being a farmer was never what Ayrton truly enjoyed, and whilst he helped out for a couple of years, especially during his time karting, everyone knew he was always destined for greatness. He began his racing career at a much later age than many modern racers, taking up karting at the age of 13, but his natural talent would already be on display when he won his first championship, the South American Karting Championship, by the age of just 17. This meant that he had accomplished everything he could locally, thanks to some great sponsorships he earned. The next big logical move for the Brazilian would be to head to Britain, where he would be thrust into the big leagues at the home of motorsport. Fast forward a couple of years, and numerous junior and amateur championships, the Brazilian found himself with a drive for Toleman. This allowed him to make a name for himself, and Senna ended up with McLaren, the team with whom he'd go on to win 3 championships. Unfortunately, Senna, who had been a loyal servant to the McLaren team, would find himself heading to a new team, and this would be one of the most impressive legacy teams in the championship, Williams, for the 1994 season. The 1994 Formula One season. The 1994 Formula One season, which would also feature the brilliant Michael Schumacher, was a year where Senna was tired of the issues he had with McLaren and believed a move to Williams would once again allow him to compete and win his 4th title. But things were already not as expected during the first couple of races. Upon Senna's arrival, the team had already run into some big issues, with Williams struggling to strike a deal with a reliable engine manufacturer, and the team ultimately ended up having to turn to American manufacturer Ford by the time the 3rd race of the season came around. The problem was that Senna demanded a car that would win him the championship, and this was the only available option to try and make this possible. During testing before the races at the Estoril circuit, Senna already had the following to say: "I have a very negative feeling about driving the car and driving it on the limit and so on. Therefore, I didn't have a single lap that I felt comfortable or reasonably confident. I am uncomfortable with the car." The words would create incredible controversy later, and many even suggested the Brazilian predicted something bad was about to happen. One of the problems with engines was that Ayrton Senna had an incredibly unique driving style, which heavily relied on him pushing the engine to the absolute limit for him to have adequate traction. Senna would constantly be pushing the throttle before releasing and revving the engine through corners in a way that would give him additional traction during the midpoint of the corner. But it also meant that the Brazilian needed incredible confidence in his car if he was to perform at his best, something the Williams FW16 was simply not giving him. After 2 races without scoring a point, the pressure was on, and to continue performing at a high level, Senna knew that it was up to him to outdrive the car for performance. This would all come full circle as the grid headed to Imola for the 3rd round of the 1994 season. The race that changed Formula One forever. A full Formula One race weekend starts with a couple of practice sessions. These sessions are a way of allowing the drivers to understand the track and prepare for more intense qualifying and race sessions. Whilst the same was to apply for the San Marino Grand Prix, things were already quite tense during the first practice session. Senna's teammate, Ruben Barrichello, would find himself in the wall at the Variante Bassa Chicane whilst Senna was on track, and in a move that would become synonymous with the Brazilian, he turned off his car and stopped at the scene of the accident to see what happened. Senna rushed the car to turn it off in a move that allowed FIA doctor, at the same time, Sid Watkins, to save the life of his fellow Brazilian. Once practice concluded, Senna vigorously inspected his Williams with his engineer and eventually returned to his hotel, where he broke down in tears, describing the Barrichello incident. Nevertheless, the following day Senna was back, and during the morning session, he set a personal best time, which was a slight indication that his car had improved, and this gave Senna confidence before the important qualifying session in the afternoon. Death of Roland Ratzenberger. Just 18 minutes into qualifying, silence set down on the fans attending Imola. Simtek driver Roland Ratzenberg struck the concrete wall as he was about to get through the infamous Villeneuve curve. It was later revealed that he veered off into the concrete at around 195 miles per hour. The impact was so severe that the car actually bounced off the concrete and landed in the middle of the track. Senna, who saw the crash on his garage television, rushed to one of the marshal cars to get to Ratzenberger. By the time Senna arrived, he was already transferred to an ambulance. Senna later found out that Ratzenberger died from the injuries he sustained. Senna retired from qualifying and returned to his motorhome, where he broke down in tears. This visibly angered Senna, and he even chose not to attend the post-qualifying press conference. What many people might not have known is that on the same day of Ratzenberger's death, Senna actually started the F1 driver safety group, where he and many other drivers would speak to the FIA about the safety standards of racing. The terrifying last moments of the life of Ayrton Senna. May 1st, 1994, Racing Sunday, and Senna has a point to prove. The day started with a traditional morning session, where Senna was looking good, but much like the rest of the weekend, drivers Pedro Lamy and JJ Letho were involved in another massive collision, which saw debris scattered all over the track and actually injured some of the spectators. This accident brought out the safety car, and Senna was leading behind the car. Senna eventually got fed up and he pulled along the Opel Vectra, asking it to speed up. Senna purposely did this not to gain an advantage, but he understood the risks of speeding off with cold tires. This was something considered post-race. The problem with an Opel Vectra is that it was primarily used as a family sedan, which meant that it didn't have much speed. This is ultimately the reason why F1 had decided to move to Mercedes and its more advanced sports models. Nevertheless, the safety car eventually pulled into the pit lane and the drivers could start with Senna leading. Senna set fastest lap after fastest lap, looking one with the car. But something shocking happened on lap 7, an incident that would change the landscape of Formula One forever and shake the FIA to its core. As the race continued, Senna took a different line on lap 7 through the Tamburello chicane. His car veered off into an unprotected concrete barrier, and Senna smashed into the barrier, ultimately losing consciousness. By the end of it, Senna would be taken to hospital where he'd succumbed to his injuries. It was later revealed that he entered the corner at a whopping 192 miles per hour before losing control. Now, the legend of Senna was etched into the history books, and he was given a state funeral in Brazil. This incident is what ultimately forced the FIA to make changes. Ultimately, the debate rages on. What exactly caused this fatal crash? Or was there simply a dark cloud hanging over Imola, and FIA stewards should have heeded the warning of the Brazilian? Even the great Michael Schumacher, who ultimately won the race, would not have much to say and didn't believe the win was deserved.